Welcome to VCR, Vintage Cinema Rewind. We're bringing old movies to new viewers. I'm Blake.
My lips are burning. I feel like I just kissed a hairdryer. Blake and I took a pizza pocket break, and I put some hot sauce on mine, and wow.
That whole sentence was part of like the cosmic unconsciousness because I brought up hairdryer as well, like 20 minutes before that.
Yeah, I know.
The great cosmic unconsciousness,
man. Yeah.
Repo Man.
Fuck yeah,
1984.
bro.
We're talking about it right now. The deep dive.
The deep dive, and boy, are there depths to plumb.
Yes. So if you haven't seen this movie, really recommend going and checking out the primer episode. Like you said in the primer episode where we talk no spoilers and who this movie's for, like the less you probably know going into this one, ultimately probably the better. But there is kind of some caveats about who this movie may or may not be for.
Yeah, I guess so, right? It is kind of funny. There's that great opening scene when like Harry Dean Stanton is like, you know, clearly giving this kid this runaround about his car and all that. And I was like, you know, I'm always analyzing movies because I'm a storyteller myself. And I'm just like, okay, what's going on? Is he trying to rob him? Is he trying to whatever?
Right.
And then he gets in the car and I'm like, okay, well, is he trying to like help him steal a car? Which was correct. And then someone runs out and like tries to stop him, but he just drives away. So
right.
Anyway.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, the movie's called Repo Man. I kind of knew that was what was going on, is Harry Dean Stanton was getting him to drive the extra car for him.
Yeah.
Which is weird that Harry Dean Stanton is just out and about like
conscripting children into his line of work. Yeah.
Well, he's technically 21. He's 18, but he's technically 21 for his ID.
Yeah, that's true, right?
Okay, so we're talking Repo Man. I love how this movie opens, and it kind of like gives you an idea of like the vibe of this movie, right? Like we've got the opening credits, which is like very punk rock, and then there's like some serious zaniness to the opening scene with Purnell, the
professor
mad scientist.
Yeah, and boy is he mad, right? Yeah, and then like the highway patrol officer pulls him over, and it's just kind of like, what's in the trunk? And doesn't he just say like, you don't want to look in the trunk?
Yeah, yeah. It's an interesting performance. Like in the first few times he pops up, I was like, this guy's really going for something, and I don't quite know what it is yet.
Yeah.
And then it's like it's brought up later in the movie that he's had a lobotomy.
That's why he's acting so strange, and he's had prolonged exposure to radiation.
Yes.
From the sounds of it.
Whatever is in that trunk has clearly made things even worse for him.
It is kind of funny. At one point he kind of just. Later in the movie, Otto gets in the car with him, and Otto's kind of like, why don't you let me drive? You look exhausted. And he's like, what are you talking about? I feel great. And then he's just kind of like, oh, yeah, I am exhausted. And he kind of collapses.
Yeah.
And Otto pulls over and just very calmly pulls him out of the car and just kind of deposits him on a nearby park bench and then just drives away.
Throws his dead body out to the side.
Pretty much, right?
Man, let's talk about the vibe of this movie a bit. Like the style, how it's filmed so aggressively. Like everything in this movie is just jacked up to 11.
Yeah, it's very densely packed too, right?
Yeah.
And again, we talked about this in the primer. It almost reminded me of like an episode of South Park in terms of like the rapid fire cruelty and like just how absurd the world is. Like,
yeah.
I want to talk about Kevin. So when we first meet Otto, he's working with his friend Kevin in a grocery store or something, and then Kevin's kind of like singing, and Otto's like, hey, man, knock it off. And then he gets reamed out by his boss. He gets fired. So then he just pushes Kevin over into this thing of cans, stack of cans. And in my notes I wrote in all caps, he hates these cans! ! So then the manager fires Otto, and then he just fires Kevin too, basically for no reason.
Yeah.
And it's so funny. Like, you know, a couple scenes later, he catches... you know, his girlfriend cheating on him. And then as he kind of like stalks off, Kevin comes in. He's like, hey, come on. Like, that's my parents' bedroom.
Yeah.
Like, what are you guys doing? There's another scene later where these kind of street thugs trick him into like, he's working at a gas station, and they trick him into like going and looking for a box of matches while they steal someone else's car.
Right.
And then that happens. And then I think my favorite joke in the whole movie is when they sneak into the hospital to go visit Bud, and he's just kind of walking down the hall. He sees a gurney with like a blanket over it. He lifts the blanket. It's Kevin. He doesn't even say anything. He just lowers the blanket and walks away.
Yeah.
Like, I was like howling when that happened.
There's just like, It's so funny how Kevin just pops up throughout this movie, right? Like I just
Yeah.
in the opening scene I was like, okay, Kevin, and then I was like, oh, we'll never see that guy again, and he just continues to crop up. There's like also the quote from him where he's like, there's room to move as a fry cook.
Yeah, there's room to move as a fry cook. Nothing goes well for Kevin.
No, Kevin's like the ultimate dweeb of the movie.
He almost, again, going with the South Park comparison, he's almost kind of like the Butters character.
Oh man,
Dude, I'm like, I don't care if you keep this in or not, but like I'm fighting back a cough, like my nose is running. I'm normally not a bitch when it comes to hot sauce, but what did you give me?
my heart is shit.
Did you poison me?
Yes, I love it.
You love poisoning me?
Yes, I love the poison.
I'm picturing you like a fantasy novel as like a medieval poisoner, and you're just like, I love the poison. What can I say?
So flamboyant about it.
I don't care who knows it. I love poison.
Oh, that's great. I love how like West Coast punk this movie is too, right? Like there's this underlying anarchy to it that just, I felt it throughout the movie. Like obviously this is the 80s. It's the Reagan era and or Ronald Reagan era, and there's definitely like some counterculture stuff happening in this movie.
There's a great scene with his parents. I think it's the only scene his parents are in where they're just they're sitting on the couch watching this televangelist, and like they're just glued to the fucking couch, and like
right.
The mom lights up a joint and everything, and
they like their voices, like the way that they're acting in that scene is that they're like essentially brainwashed.
Yeah, they're essentially like they're the ones who are lobotomized, right?
Yeah.
Like they're not looking at their son while he's talking to them,
right,
etc. I actually like, and again, it's not really that kind of movie where like you need deep, complex motivations, but I did appreciate that scene because I'm like, is that why this kid is so angry? Because his parents aren't paying attention to him?
Partly that, and I think like that's probably how like the punk rock movement got established, right? Is like the hippies, like like the pacifists, the burnout, like all of that like era, and then having these kids who, their parents are like burnt out and like probably not paying a whole lot of attention, and then you get these angry kids, and especially with the Reagan era and like the counterculture movements.
It's kind of funny. Like he's talking to his parents about it. He's like, you offered me $1,000 if I finish school, and I really want to, but what if you just give me the money now, and blah 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 blah. And at first you're kind of like, okay, like this kid is just fleecing his parents for money, right? But then they're like, oh, we gave it away.
Yeah.
He's like, we gave it to the church.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, what am I supposed to do? He's like, oh, well, you're on the honor roll of the Chariots of Fire. It was like a joint donation from all of us. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so
By
good.
the way, like, fuck televangelists. Ugh.
Yeah, I really wasn't sure like why that was included until the very end. Honestly, like when they appear at the, when everybody's kind of coalescing around the car, like I love that scene, but like up until that I was like, why are these televangelists even here? But it does make sense as well, because it's like also just again about the 80s and stuff. It's also funny because we're kind of circling back into that period, that moment right now where the televangelists are in control, and like
are the televangelists in control right now?
Well, not like necessarily fully in control, but like they've got some sway with the Trump.
Oh yeah. Ugh.
So
yeah, there is kind of this weird like spiritual thread to this movie though, right? Like,
right.
Otto, he has this great conversation with Miller about like you said, the cosmic unconsciousness, and like all. It feels very like law of attraction-y and all that stuff, and like
right.
It's funny. Miller is clearly a huge burnout too.
Yeah,
and he's like, that's why I like taking the bus, because I do my best thinking on the bus. And he's like, well, you can't drive.
Yeah.
He just doesn't even really deny it.
I genuinely thought Miller was just like a homeless guy who just like hung out around the repo thing for most of the movie.
Yeah, I mean, he's like one step up from a homeless guy, I guess, right?
Like he's great, and his performance is actually really good in this movie. Like that when they sit and he has that monologue, like that's just one camera shot the whole time, and he like has this crazy awesome monologue about aliens and space-time and everything.
I do have it's one of the things I found so charming about this movie is it really does kind of give you the sense of like, we've all worked dead-end jobs, and like a lot of us have worked dead-end jobs with like some very big personalities. Like I worked in kitchens for a long time, right? As a cook, and like, I was the youngest guy there, and a lot of the people I was working with were like older, like career cooks, right? So like you meet some wild. It took me back to those days of being like the young guy surrounded by all these weird eccentric people, with like weird eccentric beliefs, right? But you
Right.
do develop a weird kind of almost like a begrudging friendship with them anyways.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Miller's like kind of the key for all of that with Otto, right? Yeah. No, I think that's a really good scene, so I wanted to highlight that.
It does, like, I guess what I'm trying to say is like this movie does kind of just feel like hanging out with your friends.
Yes.
They may not be good friends or even good people, but you're hanging out with your friends.
Or your coworkers.
Yeah, I guess, right?
The last piece of like the whole vibe of this movie, and it's kind of actually more the aesthetic, is all of the like bland food and drinks being served to everybody.
That was pretty funny, right?
Like everything is just no name style, and so I actually dug into that a bit, and that was actually like a big part of 80s American culture was like every like food and drink brand just like decided to get as bare bones as possible. Part of like that blue and white like aesthetic was actually like a marketing tool of the 80s.
Really, like just really stripped down.
Yeah. And so that actually became like something that after this movie they actually kind of did away with because of like how bland everything is. And like, this movie is pretty like hard hitting with how anti-consumerism it is, right?
I guess, yeah. Well, it's funny. There's scenes where they're drinking cans of beer, and it's just a can that says beer
Yeah,
on it,
yeah.
right? Yeah.
What I love about that, though, is it's so funny that on the flip side in Canada, we actually have like this big no-name brand. Like,
yeah, it's like no-name culture, right?
yeah, and that's kind of like exactly what this movie is kind of harping against, is just like consume this bland, like unseasoned, like at no extra like thing going on
Well,
with
it's
food.
cheap, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. It is funny from a marketing standpoint how it's just like it doesn't look inviting or interesting, but you lock onto it and you're like, I'm gonna get it because it's cheap, right?
Right.
Like no-name cottage cheese, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. Like it's exactly like that. And it's so funny that even though apparently America got a little bit more away from that, we're just like still in that era in Canada.
Oh, well, us Canadians are so. You know what's funny? I used to work for a company where a lot of what we did was like we took marketing materials from the US and we had to translate it for a Canadian audience.
Right.
And I used to joke that a lot of what we were doing was just taking the exclamation points out, right? Like, and don't quote me on this. This was a while ago, but like in the US, you can say this is the greatest vacuum cleaner on the market. Well, like you can't say that legally in Canada because you can't quantify that claim, right?
Right.
So it was really interesting how different trends from across the border didn't always make it, you know?
Yeah. There's definitely like on the scale of socialist to capitalist, like the US is way more tipped towards capitalist than we are. Like
Oh,
we're
oh
somewhere...
God, are you kidding? Yeah.
So it's so funny when movies like this kind of pop up and like there is kind of that difference that you can kind of feel like the difference in the culture. And like a lot of this is West Coast culture as well in the 80s, but like there is definitely like even contrast to Canada and US.
Well, it is interesting. One of my favorite characters was the I forget his name, but he's the Repo Man who's like a retired cop or something.
Yeah.
And he's the biggest dickhead of the group, right?
Plessner.
Yeah. No, but there's a scene where like Otto gets in his face. He's like, "Fuck you." He's like, "Fuck you." And he's just like, "I fought in 2 world wars. I was a prison guard for 10 years."
Yeah.
Yeah. So don't tell me fuck you. And then it's just funny. This is just, and I can't overstate enough how bitterly funny this movie is. But like, there's another scene where Otto's in the office talking to somebody, and Plesner's just sitting there knitting.
Yeah.
It's just knitting. Like, yeah.
Man. I love how all of them are named after beers too. Like I barely even noticed that, but then it was like Light also, like Bud Light.
Yeah.
And I love how Bud and Light are both just like very opposite of each other. Like Bud has this whole code about the Repo Man code and like how you take the cars back and like, you're passive and you try like to, you don't try to escalate situations. You've got a gun, but you don't want to use it kind of thing. Like you want to look like a cop so that people are afraid to use their guns on you.
Yeah, right.
And then Light is just like this like jack the car. Like, you know, he doesn't dress like a cop at all. He literally at one point, like one of the craziest scenes of the whole movie that's really intense actually, is when him and Otto are out stealing a car, and then they start getting shot at from inside the house.
Yeah.
And Light literally just like lights him up from outside.
Yeah, he just levels his pistol and just starts firing.
Yeah,
right?
it's just like hand cannoning at him,
Yeah,
right? Like
it's so funny. And it's funny they set it up right early. And again, this movie's smart. Like, it's funny, earlier he's like looking at Light's kit and like there is a gun in there. He's like, "Hey, don't touch that."
yeah.
And then like later on they're back at the yard and Otto's like freaking out. I mean,
Right, obviously.
I've never been shot at, but I'd probably have something to say about it. And he's just standing there. Light's just kind of standing there with his gun in his hand, like, what? Like,
Yeah.
what's the big deal? And then, like, he just kind of fires a shot at Otto's feet, but then it turns out it's blanks.
Yes.
Like, it's not even really loaded.
Right.
You know?
Which I didn't expect at all, but like did make sense ultimately.
I guess, right?
Yeah, Light's not that stupid.
I know, right?
But I love as well, as a side note, when him and Light are in the car, they've stolen the car and then they're throwing gifts out the window and the gifts are just like full of money.
Yeah, I know. That was actually maybe my second favorite joke in the whole movie.
Oh, it's so good. They just like do not care about the cars or whatever's in them. They're just like looking to get their
Looking to get
commission.
their paycheck. It's
Yeah.
so funny too when they need to steal a car from some lady and he has him like throw a dead rat in the car. And the woman is so unfazed. She's like, "Oh, how charming," and she just very calmly pulls out a thing of pepper spray and sprays him.
Yeah.
I will say all the performances are great, but when he's standing at the side of the road having been hit by pepper spray, I
Yeah.
was a little, his acting was a little, I was like, okay, I've never been pepper sprayed. I imagine you'd be a little more upset.
Yeah, I guess that's probably because of like what we've seen people get pepper sprayed as like in other TV shows and stuff, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know. I've never been pepper sprayed either, so I couldn't tell you.
We could pepper spray each other and just find out.
For the pod.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Subscribe to our Patreon.
I mean, I've never been pepper sprayed, but I have eaten a Carolina Reaper, so that's more or less the same thing.
Okay, now just imagine it in your eyes.
Yeah, so much worse. Well, mostly worse.
Mm-hmm. I was hanging out with a friend last night, and he was like, He's like, "I just ate a hot pepper. Don't let me touch my eyes." And I just looked at him like, "You're gonna touch your eyes right now." And he's like, "Oh, they're stinging. You're right."
You already have
I gotta do his head.
the cosmic unconsciousness.
Woo!
I love the punk rock trio. Well, I love 2/3 of them. I think the one guy's maybe a little too stupid and a little annoying.
Like he
Yeah.
literally laughs like,
Yeah, it's a little too annoying in that sense. But
Yeah.
Duke and what's her name? Diane?
I think it's Debbie.
Debbie. Duke and Debbie. I love Duke and Debbie. My pitch for funniest quote of the entire movie.
I think I know what you're gonna say, but go for
is
it.
"Let's go do some crimes."
No, it's fuck this. Let's go do some crimes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Fuck this. Let's go do some crimes. I laughed until I cried almost, like on the
Yeah.
borderline.
It's so funny too. Like, I've heard this joke before that like in the 80s and the 90s, criminals were criminals just for the sheer joy of it.
Yeah.
And like that's the perfect crystallization of it, right?
Right.
Like, fuck this, let's go do some crimes. But then in the next scene, when Debbie is trying to like convince him to like back off, she's like, "Duke, let's go do some crimes." And he's like, "Yeah, let's get sushi and then not pay."
It's funny too because like the sushi thing keeps coming around because of the cosmic unconsciousness thing.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
That
It's-
pops up 2 or 3 times after that.
It's so funny too when like they're constantly robbing people, but
Yeah.
like they keep missing the main characters.
Yeah.
There's a great scene where Otto and Bud buy some beer
Yeah.
from like a old Asian man, and then they walk out, and then like Duke and them like rise from behind the
Yeah.
counter. They're robbing him while it was going on.
Right.
I think one of my favorite moments is when Duke and Debbie are sitting in this car and they're about to rob a store. He's like, like maybe we should settle down, get a small house. And Debbie's like, "What are you talking about?" He's like, "I want you to have my babies."
Yeah.
And she kind of like rebuffs him, and he's just like, and he just like shakes it off, and then they go in, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then that's when I think that's the like final big sequence of them.
the big
right?
shootout where
Yeah.
everybody gets shot.
Yeah.
That's so fucking funny.
Oh man. And then Duke dying in that scene too, when he's just like, "The lights are growing dim, Otto. I know a life of crime has led me to this sorry fate, and yet I blame society.
And then-
Society made me what I am."
And then Otto has a great line where he's like, "That's bullshit. You're a punk kid from the suburbs." He's like, "Yeah, well, it still hurts."
Yeah.
And then he just gargles out his final breath. That scene is so funny when like everybody gets shot, and at one point like Debbie points her gun at Otto, and he has his hands up, and he just says that great line where he's like, "I don't suppose you're interested in pursuing anything romantic with me, are you?"
There's something like really almost even like anti-relationship about this movie too, like
Oh my god, yeah.
because even at one point like Layla kind of gets set up as the love interest for Otto, and then she just like tortures him with like no qualms about it whatsoever.
To be fair, I don't think Otto's that great a guy either. Like, there's a great scene where like he goes to talk to her at work, and they're like in this room, and he just basically starts ripping his own clothes off.
Yeah,
and she's like, I'm at work. She has to slap him like 3 times in that movie.
It's really good. Yeah, everything about them is.
So you know how the naked man works 2 out of 3 times? That's the one time it doesn't work apparently.
Well, the naked man, you're supposed to be naked when they arrive.
Yeah, you can't. It takes the mystique if you just start ripping everything off. Let that be a lesson to you young folks.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
It works 2 out of 3 times if you do it right.
It's that great line from Anchorman where it's like 50% of the time it works all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyways, so yeah, it's funny. Otto and Layla have kind of a relationship, I guess, but then at the end of the movie, like, he is about to get into the green car. More on that later. And she's like, Otto, what about our relationship? And he's just like, fuck that. He just wanders off.
I actually think there's something really elegant about how this movie ends.
Yeah, right?
Like, surprisingly, like, I was surprisingly satisfied with the ending of this movie.
It's almost, what is it, like a 67 Chevy or something?
64 Chevy Malibu.
64 Chevy Malibu. So after eating many souls, it kind of starts glowing green and like crackling with electricity, and everyone's kind of like reeling back in horror. Then we get this big dramatic zoom in on Miller.
Mm-hmm.
Suddenly he just gets in the car and they fly it into the sky. And it's one of those scenes where, one of those moments where like there are times in storytelling where something doesn't really logically make sense, but it sort of like emotionally makes sense.
Yes.
Because like we know Miller is this weird spiritual guy. We know he can't drive, but suddenly it's like, oh, of course Miller could drive this car into the sky, right? Of course, right? There's a weird kind of like emotional, almost like dream logic to that.
And it's just like a rejection of everything, basically. Like it's a rejection of this period of time, right? Like,
yeah, because we see the car floating off, and at one point we get this big wide shot of like gridlock traffic, and they're floating over it.
Well, and he rejects the relationship, and the car rejects religion, and it rejects government, and it just like it's everything is rejected, and in the end they're just like happy.
It's like a message of pure liberation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. I was super satisfied with it. As a side note, the car when it's glowing like that looks super cool.
Yeah, I don't know how they pulled that off in the fucking 80s for $1 million.
They used a bunch of 3M paint.
Okay.
So that actually was like real glowing like that, and there's no special effects. It's just like a crazy glowing paint.
Wow. Okay. Hey.
Yeah. And it looks phenomenal. Like I thought it looked really cool.
Yeah. No. And then it just kind of flitters off into space, and then we roll credits, and you're like, yeah, okay, sure. Yeah. Also, how many times does Bud get shot in this movie? There's another. So he gets shot during the shootout. I am a professional writer. I get money for this. It's so funny when like they have the final confrontation in like the scrapyard, and there's a SWAT helicopter coming by. Bud is like waving this gun around. He's like, "Come and get me, coppers!" And they just like they probably put like 4 bullets in his chest,
straight into his stomach, like like light him up. Yeah,
I know, right? It was kind of like, what was your plan, bro? Like, it's so funny too when they finally, when Otto and Bud finally confront each other, and like Bud's in the car, and I was just like, come on, like we'll sell it, get the 20 grand and split it 60-40. And he's like, no. Bud's like, well, who should get the 60? And he's like, well, I figured that because I found it. And then Bud just calmly lifts his gun. Otto's like, that you should get it.
That's a really good quote too. That's in my long list of my favorite quotes of the whole movie. I think 2 of the 3 of the quotes are Bud quotes, because my other one is when they're talking about Russia and how you don't have to pay for anything in Russia, and Bud was like, all free my ass. What are you, a fucking commie, huh? And Otto's like, no, I'm not a commie. And Bud's like, well, you better not be. I don't want no commies in my car. No Christians either.
Yeah, no Christians either. Bud is such an asshole, but like I think one of my favorite quotes from him is like, He's just like, look at all those assholes. Fucking ordinary people. I hate them.
Yeah. I mean, it takes a certain personality, I'm sure, to be a Repo Man, right?
There is, in a weird way, like Otto and Bud's relationship is almost sort of like the emotional heart of the movie.
Yeah.
It's almost like a weird brotherly father-son kind of thing.
Right. Even though in the end, like, Otto even, again, leaves Bud dying on the side of the
Yeah, that
road.
is true. That is true. You know what's funny, too? I really liked Marlene.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, when we first meet the crew, there's Marlene, the receptionist, and, like, she's very beautiful and, like, very well-dressed and, like, very professional. You're looking at all these characters, then you're looking at her, and you're like, there's got to be something here. Like, how did this make sense?
Right.
And then there's a scene where she is just beating the shit out of these people in their office, like, with karate and kung fu moves.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, she's crazy, too.
Yeah.
That's how this makes sense, right?
I just love the scene where they, like, the Repo Men get introduced and Light walks in after Otto's poured out the beer and he's like, did somebody pee in here again?
Yeah, that too.
You're all right.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
So funny.
I will say that, like, somewhere between the second and third act, I did get a little lost in the sauce, and, like, I did get, like, almost slightly distracted. Like, it's almost, like, too chaotic at a certain point.
There is. I do want to see this movie again because there's definitely stuff I missed.
Yes,
I
agree.
Like, I was just kind of like, where are we? What's going on?
There's a lot of plot threads, and, like, I'll say that, you know, if you compare this to Snatch, I think that the characters are significantly less written. The characters aren't, you know, the selling point of this movie. In the same way that Snatch, the characters are the selling feature of the movie, I think.
Kind of, yeah.
So,
I was kind of funny. There's that scene where all the older Repo Men are in a car together, and they're kind of just up to no good. And I was kind of thinking, like, it's almost like they're almost very slight variations of the same personality. You know what I mean? Like, they're all just angry dudes.
Yeah.
I will say, it was kind of sweet. There's a scene where Otto shows up, and he's clearly been beaten up, and they're kind of like, well, who did this to you?
Yeah.
And then they go and beat him up, like with baseball bats and everything. But it's the wrong person. It's like his old boss.
It's his old boss, which I did not see that coming.
Yeah,
And again, that's where it comes back to, like, there's, like, this element of Arrested Development in it where it's like, you know, if you're actually paying, like, really deep attention, there's so many, like, fun callbacks to other things in this movie.
Yeah, no, it's tightly constructed in that sense.
Yeah.
Even though they're beating up a relatively innocent guy, there's kind of funny where it's like, it really does call to mind, like, it's almost kind of like Otto is this punk kid, and they're like his 5 shitty older brothers.
Right.
Like, oh, who did this to you? We'll find him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's part of the, like, the charm of this group of guys too, is like these ragtag, like, misfit guys who are all, like, have found each other in this way, and, like, they've all become, like, this tight, like, family.
It's like a found family kind of thing.
Yeah,
you
like,
know?
because there's the other element when the scene where they're talking about John Wayne is, like, really funny because I've been in a conversation like that.
Yeah.
Where, you know, like, somebody just, like, says something really inflammatory about everybody's, like, idol, and then everybody's, like, upset about it.
Yeah.
Like, those are just, like, fun guy conversation moments, you know?
Yeah, and it is funny too. Like, that conversation is like, there's a great moment when who is it, Ollie, like the leader?
Yeah.
He has this great part where he's just like, that doesn't mean he's gay. He's like, I know. He's like, I know. I like to watch my friends fuck. Like, there's a moment of silence, and he's just like,
and the police officer's like, yeah, me too.
Yeah, that's He's like, what?
It's really good.
Yeah.
That actually, I didn't realize this, but the director actually let them freestyle quite a bit. So I kind of imagine that a lot of that is, like, just
I think they said that a lot of Miller's dialogue in that scene in particular was just like him just spitballing, right?
Yeah, right. Telling stories. I think the John Wayne story is actually based on a story from one of those people had in real life about John Wayne. So
I will say, like,
heard.
This movie is like it holds up pretty well, but there is like an F slur in that scene.
Yeah.
If that is something you're sensitive to, then like maybe skip it. But
yeah.
I
mean, it's an aggressive 80s movie. Like, it almost was bound to pop up at some point.
Yeah, actually, surprisingly though, there's nothing much else in there. Like, there's there's not a lot of overt racism or sexism.
No.
It's just there's just one. They had to get the one slur in there.
Yeah.
But-
There's like the borderline moment where like I'm like, oh, this could go really wrong if when Otto does go to like the old woman's house and like he's talking to her about repossessing it, and he's like, like I really needed to pay this so I don't have to take your car kind of thing. And then like all of her like family shows up and it's just like a bunch of dudes who look kind of intimidating. And I'm like, oh, this could get a little racist right here really quick.
Okay, yeah, there's that. So let me just say that foreign movie from 1984, which is, oh my God, it's 40 years old, isn't it?
Yeah.
Fuck off. Oh, man. Time, bro.
Yeah.
I will say for a movie from 1984, it holds up relatively well.
Yeah, there's like a couple minor things. Minor. But it is funny, too, that they've set up the car, like they've put it on the stilt so that he can't steal it, and then they beat him up because he tries to steal the car.
Yeah, that is pretty funny.
It's really smart.
I do find it kind of funny, like, structurally, that, like, again, I walked into this movie knowing nothing. And, like, to be honest, maybe this is my privilege showing, but I've never dealt with, like, a repossessor. In that scene where he's stealing the car, I'm like, what's going on? And it's like, oh, they're repossessing it, right? I was just kind of like, nodding my head, hands on my hips, like, what a good like premise for a movie.
Yeah.
Right? Like, what a sweet premise. Like, there is some kind of like sci-fi fantasy mumbo jumbo like floating around and like government conspiracy stuff.
Yep.
I almost feel like if you took that out and just focused on these characters jacking cars, like, it would still work.
I kind of like that as well. I was going to bring that up. Like, there's something about, I could do a movie a year for the rest of my life about like a random odd job that I don't know absolutely nothing about.
Yeah, and like it's kind of true. Like, I'm always looking for new ideas, and it's kind of like, what's like the weirdest, most mundane job you can think of, and how can you build a whole story around it?
Yeah, I'm like really in the weeds right now on The Wire. Like, I'm into season 4 right now, and it's like, it's basically that. It's like police officers, drug dealers, and like drug addicts, but it's like so deep into the weeds of like this world at this point, and I'm really interested in it.
You're into it, yeah.
Yeah, it's not like it's prestige to TV. It's not like, a baddie of the week kind of thing or something like lame like that. It's like, how are these characters, like, how does this world change as these characters move through it kind of thing?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I don't know. I've gotten more and more into that as I've gotten older, I guess, and like I like that kind of storytelling. So that
we're becoming dads. Neither of us have kids, but
neither
we're
of us
becoming
are
dads.
any closer to being
like,
fathers.
Wow.
But yeah, no, there's something about that where it's like, oh, like this is cool. Like, I don't really know a lot about Repo Man, and like this is kind of fun getting to see, even though this movie is zany and crazy, like some of the aspects of the dangers of the job and stuff like that.
I guess, I mean, my attitude was always just like, a repo man shows up at your front door. It's like, I'm here for your couch, or like, I'm here for whatever. And then you just, but I guess, yeah, there are people who probably wouldn't let you, and you'd have to get creative.
Yep.
Fun.
It's an intense job.
Man, if I were Repo Man, I'd just like look at them and be like, I'm here for your car. I'm really sorry. Give me your key.
You'd be the Kevin.
I'd be the Kevin, I guess, yeah.
Where you got to be the Otto.
Gotta be angry and aggressive.
Yeah. The life of a Repo Man is always intense, Otto.
Yeah.
What a great end. What a solid end.
Yeah, really. Does Bud survive this movie?
There's no way Bud survives this
Yeah,
he not only was he shot once, but now he's got like extra wounds. Like, I don't know how, I've never been shot, and I don't know a lot of people that have been shot, but I gotta imagine if you're recovering from a bullet wound and then you get shot again, that you're not gonna make it.
Well, especially if you're recovering from a bullet wound, you're gonna want to avoid getting shot again. You're really, really gonna want to avoid getting shot 4 more times.
Yeah, all in the gut. Like, that's not good. Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of stuff going on down there.
Yeah, we gotta pull the bullets out.
Yeah, when it bleeds and everything else, it's not good. You don't want to be mixing the A's with the B's,
Heyo. Let that be. You know what, guys? If you take nothing else from this podcast, it's don't get shot.
Yeah.
Do you think any of our listeners have been shot?
I almost said I hope so.
Yeah, I kind of do too. Sound off in the comments if you've been shot. I hope you're okay.
I hope you're alive.
Yeah, I hope you're alive. I hope you're alive, smiley face.
Jesus.
The next time a friend texts me in a crisis, I'm just going to be like, hope you're alive, like kissy face.
Oh, man. I love it's almost like kind of a vibe of just like the government agents, and like they're all just kind of like muttering to themselves what's happening throughout the movie, and like they just keep appearing to like pick stuff up off the street and like and analyze the radiation levels and stuff.
And then there's Layla's boss with like the mechanical hand and
Yeah.
all that stuff. And
Right.
blah, 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 blah.
Well, I'm pretty sure she holds her hostage is how that works out.
I was a little unclear. There was a lot going on. Even,
Yeah.
What did you think of Layla herself?
I don't know. She's kind of like the weird, conspiracy theorist person of the movie.
Kinda, yeah. And like she's working for the government.
No, she's not working for the government. She's anti-government because she's getting chased by the Men in Black.
Right, but then she kind of, she gets kind of crabbed and converted by them. Yeah,
she works at the United Fruitcake Outlet.
That's right, she does, doesn't she? It is kind of funny, though. She's like, what, 18 or something? And she's running around being chased by government agents. I do think one of my favorite moments is at the end when everyone's gathering around the magic car and like the one government agent is just like, man, wow, it's really cool. And then him and this like technician just start talking about like spirituality and they whip this book out.
Yeah, it's basically like the Scientology book essentially. It's not, but it is.
Yeah, and then they start kind of bonding over it. It's so weird.
It's almost like it shouldn't be in the movie because it just like completely irrelevant in a sense almost.
Yeah, really.
But it's just like so funny that this is added in and it's just like happening while all this other crazy
all
stuff.
this like important plot details are happening. Yeah.
It's just like, oh, there's these side characters over here that are having like a really funny conversation. Let's just like clip over to them a couple times.
Let's throw it in.
Because it's probably something that actually happens, right? In real life, like how often are you like sitting in like a meeting or something, you're sitting in the back and like, you make a joke to your buddy who you're sitting beside and like kind of thing, like stuff like that. Like that's happens. That's human nature.
Oh, come on. As a professor, like the amount of private conversations I have to break up is pretty funny.
Yeah. So it's just kind of like that. And it's like, oh, let's actually like give some screen time to that. And it's very entertaining.
It is very entertaining.
I'm glad you brought that up because I almost forgot about it.
Again, like I think this is a story more about a world than characters, but like what characters they have, they really make the most out of them. Like Kevin, the old lady, the government agents. Like even there's those two brothers who like are like almost
the Rodriguez brothers.
The Rodriguez brothers.
The Rodriguez brothers.
Yeah, and like they're kind of running interference at one point. I think at one point they actually help Otto because Marlene like conscripts them or something.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh man, I forgot about the Rodriguez brothers. That's the thing is like there's just like so much going on in this movie that it's hard to like even just break it all down.
Yeah, it's hard to pin down, right?
That's the thing is like we've talked a little bit about the LA setting, but like this is probably one of again those like all-time great LA like movies where it's like, we get to go see like the aqueduct or whatever it's called, like where they're driving down where like the little like LA river kind of is supposed to go through the concrete there. Like that's so cool. I love when like scenes take place there and they actually get like some time to like drive around in it.
Yeah.
And then
it's like, guys, you got to clear out of here. Terminator 2 is going to be filming in about 6 years or something.
Yeah, and then there's like all of these other like Hollywood hotspots and I'm sure like, local legends and stuff like that at this point.
It's also kind of baffling to me that this whole movie was filmed for like $1 million.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, wow, inflation, right? $1 million won't even get you Chris Evans for a day.
In the 80s, now that's probably only like 4 mil, maybe less than that, like 3 mil still.
Probably, yeah. I mean, Whiplash was filmed for probably $3 million.
Yeah.
God, what a great fucking movie. I am so happy you showed me Whiplash. I might break this podcast and we can do Whiplash for my birthday.
Oh man, that might, I don't know. We'll have to
I might start a new podcast and talk about Whiplash.
That's fair. Cuz it's like I said, that's one of the all-timers, So sequels, prequels and reboots. So Bud's Repo Code actually is based on Isaac Asimov's Laws of Robotics.
Keska fuck, pardon me.
Yeah, so Bud's Repo Code: I shall not cause harm to any vehicle, nor the personal contents thereof, nor through inaction let that vehicle or the personal contents thereof come to harm.
Okay, no, I do see it now. It's right there.
There's actually a lot of Asimov in this movie, surprisingly. Like I didn't know it because I'm not a big Asimov guy. Like not in the sense that I don't enjoy his stuff. It's just like I haven't actually taken the time to like actively get into his stuff. But there's like the Purnell character is kind of a step in for Asimov as I understand it as well. And like the ideas of Asimov. Purnell, like the scientist.
Yeah. The guy with the lobotomy.
Yeah. The guy with the lobotomy.
I guess he kind of fits the image of like an aging sci-fi writer, doesn't he?
Yeah, probably. I actually really liked his performance, and I wasn't sure until the very end, like, if it quite worked for me. And then when he was like lobotomy, I was like, I get it now. I see it. I see it. There's a straight to DVD movie called Repo Chick that's from 2008 that apparently is not great, but it's actually like Alex Cole directing it, coming back to direct it again. I know very little about it because I wasn't that interested in it. What is interesting about this movie is that there's a re-edited for TV version of this movie.
Okay.
And it's amazing, apparently.
Okay.
I watched some clips of it.
So I'm guessing what? They break the movie up into like 4 or 5 like 22-minute episodes?
No,
or...
I think it's like it's TV, like 2-hour movie again.
Oh, they just edit it.
They just edited it
for television.
For television. So what they did is they took out all of the swear words. So every time somebody drops an F-bomb, they say frick or something like that, or flip. So they're like, "What the flip?" And then he's like, "Flip off," and like it's just like constantly.
Okay.
There's so many sequences where they say like really ridiculous things because all of the swear words are out. Like it becomes like this like 50s like see here kind of movie.
Interesting.
There's like this really famous line where the Rodriguez brothers show up for the first time when they're down like in the LA river bed, and and Otto calls them melon farmers. That's the curse word he uses for them.
Melon farmers.
Yeah, instead of using a racial slur, he calls them melon farmers.
Which almost sounds worse. Actually, yeah, I think I was reading that. I'm like, melon farmers sounds like a slur.
I couldn't find like the full TV edit online. If you do find it, send it to me because I'd like to watch the whole thing. But I did find like a YouTube clip that has like it's like 4 minutes and it's literally called Melon Farmer. Maybe I'll put it in like the description of this episode.
Yeah. That's up there with this is what happens when you find a stranger at the Alps.
It is. It genuinely is. And it's like the whole movie is like that though. Like the whole movie is just like flip that and shove off and like it's just like it's just
hey, see here, buddy.
Yeah, exactly. It's so great.
That is funny. You know what insult I want to bring around but no one is ever into it? Jabberwocky. You know, like from
probably got some racial undertones to
it. It's a dragon or something from one of the Lewis Carroll books. I just want to start using Jabberwocky as an insult.
I feel like that was a thing at one point.
I'm like, oh, that's fucking Jabberwocky. It does kind of sound like a slur, though, doesn't it?
Very much
All right,
so.
I'm retiring it. Never mind.
So effects and filming, when they started, they only had the 164 Chevy Malibu, and a few days into filming, I believe it was the director was driving around using it as his personal vehicle, and it got stolen.
Fuck.
So they had to find a replacement for it. They like found the replacement, and right after they got the replacement and got it like set up so that they could drive it, the police found the other car and it was undamaged. So then they had two.
Hey, look at us.
There is some damage though, and you can actually see the second Malibu that they got, the gas pump was broken. So when they're at the gas station in one scene, that you can actually see that it's a little bit different because it's busted.
Oh, so that's too bad.
It's like one of those like fun fluke things.
That is pretty funny.
Harry Dean Stanton, very hard to work with on this movie.
I did a little bit of research for once, and yeah, I was a little. You know what else disappointed me?
What?
Apparently, what's his name? Gene Hackman was a total prick on the set of the Royal Tenenbaums.
Yeah, I believe that. Yeah.
Yeah, but no. Apparently, Harry Dean Stanton was kind of. I guess it was so bad that they actually considered just writing him out of the movie.
Yeah, it's wild. Like, I didn't realize that he was difficult to work with. Like, I'm not sure if that's a thing for all movies. Like, but man, he was difficult. Like, he got mad at the director multiple times because, this one scene, the first time I read this, I was like, okay, well, that one's fair. Because Harry Dean Stanton wanted to do, like, a baseball signal to Otto when they were doing, like, a park in the car moment. And the director is just, like, not into sports. Yeah, because he's like, this, like, I don't like sports. We're not doing that. And so Harry Dean Stanton said, I've worked with the greatest directors of all time, Francis Ford Coppola, Mont Hellman. You know why they're great? Because they let me do whatever the fuck I want.
Yeah, it's weird. In a weird way, I almost kind of admire that kind of brazen confidence to just be like, I'm right.
Yeah.
You need to listen to me.
Yeah, it's something. Like, and, there was a point in time where, like, he was, whipping the bat around, and he had a real bat, and, like, the Rodriguez brothers were like, somebody's going to get hurt here. And so they, like, had to basically, like, rip the bat out of his hands and give him a plastic one. There was another issue where he didn't want to memorize his lines, and he was like, let's just go the Brando road and just, like, write my lines everywhere. And they were like, No, we're not doing that.
You're a professional actor. Learn your lines.
Yeah.
I think it's Carson or Letterman or something where, what's his face? Christopher Reeve is talking shit about Marlon Brando and like how lazy he was and how
Right.
he didn't care.
Yeah.
At least on the set of Superman. So
Well, there's like the thing with Brando, and I'm sure we'll talk about this when we do a movie about him, where he just like would test out his director. Like he would get testy with him and like see if the director cared or not. And if the director didn't care, then he just kind of phoned it in afterwards.
yeah,
So
man, we were just talking about Alice Munro and Neil Gaiman before we started recording. It's like, why are so many talented people such pricks? Ah.
Oh,
Anyways,
man. This is an interesting comment here that they were afraid of getting like the 18 plus rating or whatever.
NC-17 or whatever it is.
The NC-17 rating, and particularly around the shootout scene in the convenience store or the beer store or whatever. And so what they did was they actually like put the ketchup bottles there, so when they shot, it hit the ketchup. So like you couldn't like make out if it was ketchup or blood, basically.
Oh, okay.
I thought that was kind of genius filmmaking.
It's clever, right? Yeah.
To get around the MPAA. Oh, this is fun. So when they were doing scouting for locations, they just ended up happening upon Muhammad Ali. And
just out and about at the grocery store.
Yeah, so they were like, you should hop in this movie. Like where they wanted to add him into was when the three holy men get out of the helicopter at the very end. They wanted Muhammad Ali to like also be with them. So it's like basically after the three holy men like are turned away from the car, then Muhammad Ali is supposed to like walk up to the car, and then he gets shocked. So not even the greatest fighter in the world could like withstand this car.
That is really fucking funny.
Yeah, he was not into it.
Oh. All right. Imagine being so famous that people just want you to like appear in things, right?
The air fresheners in the car.
Yes.
They actually did sponsor this movie.
Okay, great.
Maybe one of the only movies that they've sponsored. I'm not really sure about that. Don't quote me on that one, but
there was a disgruntled marketing executive smoking a cigarette somewhere. It was just like, yeah, fuck it. Like,
Yeah. All right, we got to talk the score. How much did you notice the score of this one?
Admittedly, not super a lot.
Oh God, what do you?
I
love the score of this movie. I guess a little background on me. Like, I'm a filthy casual of punk rock. Like,
okay,
I really appreciate punk rock. I've got a few like favorite bands. Like, I've gone to one punk concert in my life.
Have
you?
Yeah,
I have.
Oh, I was at my friend's punk rock concert.
Nice. I had a lot of fun. That was maybe one of my favorite concerts to go to at all time. And I'd really like to see him. One of my favorite bands is called White Reaper. Love to see them at some point. And it's just like not only the punk rock, but like the ska music, like that, all that California style music of like the 80s, 90s, really into all that stuff. Like any bands that are out right now, like big fan of a lot of them. So I got like really into the music of this one. And there's also like some big names that are kind of attached to this. Like Iggy Pop wrote the opening intro of this movie.
Yeah, I did see that. That is pretty cool.
Yeah, so that's really cool. And he kind of got free reign. Like, and actually Iggy Pop is, somewhat of a controversial figure. Like,
is he?
He's lived a hard life. He was at kind of a downswing in his life at this point in his music career. And then the director basically just like convinced him to write this song. And that actually helped him get back on his feet and like get back into the music scene.
Gave him his mojo.
Yeah, so I think that's really cool that this movie is part of the reason why Iggy Pop probably survived that time too.
Jesus Christ, yeah.
Like I said, the Circle Jerks and the Untouchables make an appearance here.
I'm so happy that the Circle Jerks are a real band. That's so fucking funny to me. Like,
wait until I blow your mind.
All right.
So Kevin the nerd ends up joining the Circle Jerks after this movie.
Doing what?
Like, he's a part of the band.
Like, no, what does he play, though?
I have no idea.
Oh, okay.
He might just sing. I don't know.
Oh, good for him.
But he's, like, legitimately part of the band now.
Huh.
Yeah.
Okay, good for him. Imagine that.
Yeah. So
it's actually really fucking funny.
Yep. It's pretty awesome.
So things worked out for Kevin.
He's
doing okay.
I didn't think his acting was the greatest, but I'm happy that he found a band.
I think he was perfectly serviceable, but yeah, maybe he's a better musician.
Yeah. The other like big punk bands that show up in here are the Plugs and the Black Flag, which I haven't heard of a lot of these bands. Honestly, they're a little bit before my time.
Wasn't Henry Rollins in Black Flag?
I don't know. You would know if anybody knows.
I think he was.
Cool.
I'm not going to look it up. I'm just going to assume I'm right.
I'm going to re-listen to this score at some point because there are a couple songs in particular that I really, really liked that I want to find and add to my rotation because, like I said, I kind of like the vibe of this music, so...
I just like the vibes of this whole thing,
That's fair. Look back at the times. So this is considered one of the best movies of 1984 when it came out.
I was Surprised, but also not surprised. Apparently, Roger Ebert really liked this movie.
Yeah, he gave it 3 out of 4 stars.
Actually, Neil Gaiman apparently really liked this movie.
I wasn't going to bring that up.
But hey,
but
Neil
you
Gaiman,
did.
if you're listening, go fuck yourself.
No, Ebert really liked it. Like, and I kind of get it. That's what I was kind of saying in the primer episode. Like, if you get to a point, and like I've definitely been in this point where like I'm just kind of sick of like the studio big budget movies that are just like
Hyper polished, no personality.
Yeah, and like this is the perfect movie to just like throw a sledgehammer at that.
Yeah, really.
And so I kind of get why he was into it. Again, like you said, like there's something about the writing and like the depth of this movie and like all of the decisions that were made. Like you can see there's so many decisions in this movie.
There's something there. There is something under the hood, pun intended.
Yeah, there really is. And then the legacy of the film, like, so this made it into the Criterion Collection, which is kind of neat. Like it's genuinely considered a cool, like a cult classic movie. It's in Entertainment Weekly's top 50 cult films of all time. It's number 7.
I believe that.
And I think the character or the actor playing Miller won like a Saturn Award or something for best performance.
The hell is a Saturn Award?
It's like the Sci-Fi Awards, like the sci-fi movie. And I don't know if books and TV shows are also involved in Saturn. They might be. It's like, I believe Saturn's like the big sci-fi award ceremony.
I guess that makes sense.
Yeah.
Saturn.
Personal reviews and the partner factor.
I really like this movie. I'd give it a solid 8 out of 10.
Really?
Yeah, really.
To me, like I'm more of like a 7 out of 10. I had a lot of fun with this movie, and I'm coming back to it.
Yeah,
I will be rewatching this movie. But on my first watch, like, you know, I kind of got lost in a couple points.
Wait. Was this your first watch?
Yeah, this is my first time seeing
this.
Was. I wanted to do this one for the pod. Like, I wanted to do something. This one's been on my list since I was probably 18 years old. Like, this is one of those. I got into cult movies, and I got into, like, big movies when I was, like, you know, late teenage years. And, like, I'd always heard of this one as, like, you know, one of the cult classics, and I hadn't checked it out. And I was like, this is probably up my alley. Again, I think I like this movie a lot, and there's a lot of detail. I just, you know, I've seen a lot of other big cult movies, and I kind of gravitate more towards, like, the Tremors of the world, right?
Right, or, like, the John Carpenters of the world.
Yeah, so, like, it's not to say that I didn't love this movie. I love this movie, but, at this point in time, it's more in, like, my 7 range.
Okay.
So, man,
I feel like we've had this weird shift in our podcast recently where suddenly I've become the positive one. That's actually, you liked Snatch more than I did.
Yeah.
So, okay, fair.
It kind of just changes depending on how many movies you average it out, we're probably around equal.
Probably, yeah. I wonder if the people listening are like creating like psychology profiles of like the two of us and how
I don't know, like, and with this one as well, like there's almost something a little juvenile about this movie, right? Like in the sense that like it feels like a first time outing for the cast and the crew of this one. Like not to say that it's not really smartly written and there's a lot of interesting decisions here, but like some of the...
I think that's just punk rock, though.
Yeah, and
a little
maybe
bit
of
like shaking your fist at the establishment and like, fuck you and blah. Like there's something just kind of juvenile about that. You know, it is kind of funny, like when what's his face Duke is dying in Otto's arms, and Otto's just like, you're a punk kid from the suburbs, right?
Right.
Part of me was like, is Otto growing up throughout this movie?
Yeah.
Does he have kind of like a soft character arc?
He does a little bit, yeah.
A little bit, right?
Yep.
Like he's still an asshole at the end of the movie, but like it is kind of like you can kind of watch him growing up a little bit.
Yeah, he becomes his own person.
Yeah, if this was like a more serious drama, it would end with him leaving the world of Repo Man. And
he did. He flew off into space with Miller.
You're right. He did fly off into space.
Like I said, end of the movie, very elegant.
Yeah, you're right. Well, hush my mouth then. It's all good.
Oh, did I mention that Yeah, I did. Okay, never mind. I was just going to say about the paint again. I want to paint my car with that glow now.
It's such a cool detail. You had to bring it up twice.
Yeah. I love it. I really love that.
Woo!
I just thought it was special effects the whole time. And nope, it's just like really crazy, probably radioactive 3M paint.
People probably died, but yeah.
I don't know if there's been a movie in a while that's made me laugh like real like guttural laugh a couple times.
That very distinctive laugh of yours too. Yeah.
Like the moment where he said, "Let's go do some crimes." Like I genuinely laughed very hard.
That was probably like pitch perfect dialogue. Like, let's go do some crimes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Fuck off.
It's so good. No, I really enjoyed this one. I don't know. I guess I have more of a backlog of movies that I've watched that are the cult classics, and this one isn't quite in my
Didn't
my
quite
jam.
make the push or
but
the
I liked
cut.
it. I liked it a lot.
Yeah,
I'm glad we did it. I'm glad I finally watched this movie.
Me too, actually.
Yeah, I think that's it then for this week.
I guess so. So we're doing a romance.
We got a romance next.
Let's do Brokeback Mountain. Sorry, that's after our cutoff date.
That is after our cutoff date.
That is a good movie, though. It's a really good movie.
Never seen it. If I'm
Okay.
being completely honest.
Okay.
I'm sure it's completely fine.
Okay. So, yeah, no. Recommend a good rom-com or just romance or whatever.
Yeah, I got a couple
wait.
ideas.
Wait. Let's throw this out there. Do we want to laugh or do we want to cry?
Ooh. I would always rather laugh, but
I would always rather cry.
you know what movie Jess and I have been talking about for a long time, and I keep pushing it off because I'm like, we'll do it for the podcast sometime. Sleepless in Seattle.
Maybe we should just do that then.
Yeah, maybe we will.
Maybe we will. That's Tom Hanks, right?
Yeah, Tom Hanks and Meg Ryan.
Yeah, I'm down.
All right.
Is that You Had Me at Hello? Or is that something else?
I feel like yes.
Okay. Maybe we should just do that then.
All right, cool. Just simple like that. We just figured it out.
Yeah, hey.
Just
yeah.
working it out on the podcast here.
Just talking it out. Just guys being dudes.
Which is the tagline of this movie. Just guys being dudes.
Exclamation point.
Oh, yeah. John Wayne.
John Wayne.
Oh, man. Okay, see you next time. Tell your dad.
Bye.